Is it possible to say, in a first news alert, there is information coming out of the Boston Celtics that is unclear, but out of the Boston Celtics organization, that head coach Ime Udoka is facing a possible suspension of a year for an undisclosed infraction that is currently being debated inside of the organization? Journalistically,
yes, that is better language than what was revealed about this story early on, Howard. You're absolutely right, because it doesn't introduce the idea of consensual, non-consensual relationship, all of these words in the framework around a story that lights people's brains up. And it gives them a piece of information about their team that gets to the heart of the matter without clearly, I think, Amin, and I want your perspective on this. It seems like the framework of how this story was released through, like, an agent, like Udoka's agent. Like, it seemed like it had to be coming from an angle that is something we have talked about before, when information is coming to you from an angle.
Yeah, that's what I've been trying to figure out. Who benefited from having this story come out as quickly as it did? Before the Celtics not only hadn't prepared a statement, they hadn't even prepared the discipline. They didn't know what they were going to do with him. It took them a strong 12 hours, maybe more, from when the story broke to when they were like, oh, okay, he's suspended for a year. Like, to me, first of all, how big is the circle of people who are talking at that point internally?
It's got to be pretty small.
And yet, large enough, not small enough to keep that shit in house. Not small enough to make sure the 5 of us in this room, or however many, it stays here.
I mean, let me stop you right there. Mm-hmm. Because there's one other thing that we know about sports. In the 30 years I've been doing this, when an organization wants to keep a secret, they can keep a secret for a pretty good length of time.
I'm staggered. I'm staggered by how that statement seems to be less and less true every single day with every report that comes out. The number of teams I can count on one hand that I think can actually keep a secret.
Okay, well, can they keep a secret, or do they no longer want to keep a secret?
No, or they remain desiring of keeping secrets. How about that?
Great. And exactly. But let's just, for perspective, let's go back 30 years. Okay, let's go back 31 years. The Los Angeles Lakers, if I'm not mistaken, they kept Magic Johnson's HIV diagnosis a secret for, it was like 3 weeks.
Yep. They flew him home from Utah, from a preseason game in Utah, because he had flu-like symptoms. And the guys were all joking, like, oh, yeah, where'd you go out last night? It's Salt Lake City. And the players knew, I want to say, and a short amount of time before the press conference, they were told, and then they went out and showed up to the press conference. Now, obviously, it's a little different, right? Back then, if Byron Scott wanted to let Bill Plaschke know, Byron Scott would have to rush to a payphone, right, and put a quarter in, and hello, is Bill there? No, he just left. He went to the office. Oh, crap. Okay, hang up. Hey, is Bill at the office? Oh, he's not here yet. I'll let him know when you call. Okay. It's not like what it is now, which is, I'm hearing that Magic, type, right. text, right? The technology has changed the ability to keep a secret, right? Because it used to be, again, if there's 5 people in this room,
you had to take steps.
Yeah.
You don't have to take steps anymore.
No, well, you have to take different kind of steps.
And there's less friction. There's less friction to executing those steps. And
also real quick, I feel like we exist in a culture, at least in basketball. I can't speak for all sports, but there seems to be people getting off on being the one to tell, hey man, I got all the scoops. Let me tell you something. so and so's out for 7 to 9 weeks because of a knee. Like there is something in our industry in the NBA where people get off on doing that, and
But
maybe maybe
Well,
it's
isn't
it's
it-
like the quid pro quo. Yeah.
Go ahead,
Yeah,
Kate.
well, isn't it all? I mean, it also seems to me, just as you're talking, I mean, that the same way that we get our adrenaline rush from seeing tweets come in, seeing the notifications happen, I think that happens to people who are providing the information.
Well, absolutely.
knowing that
We're in the
they
news
are at
business
the
to be
heart-
first.
Not,
no.
not, no, not the people, not the
sources.
news
She's talking about the
makers.
Oh, you mean the
sources.
sources? Ah, yes, yes. Also to be.
Before, it would be like, okay, cool. So I gave him that tidbit that 3 days from now is in the Sunday edition of the Times. That's not quite as much of a rush as following this news story from afar, seeing people on First Take dance around the information you've given them. I do think there is a high baked into our news cycle right now that didn't necessarily exist 25 years ago. And then at the risk, I mean, we don't need to go down this path, but I do think it's worth noting that this, when we were talking about the facets of this story, one thing that I kept thinking about was like, this is almost like a story that exemplifies the destructive nature of an ad-based click economy.
Yeah.
I mean, in that, because if you weren't driven, if your editors weren't, and Woj wasn't, and Shams wasn't driven by whatever artificial economy has been set up, that like if you're first, you get more looks and more retweets, which I don't even know ultimately what the benefit of that is, but we certainly, whether or not it's hollow, we believe it. And I mean, just as a little background, it's like I was listening to a podcast last week about talking to Mark Andreessen, the investor who did like
The legendary Mark Andreessen.
Yeah. And the question on the table to him was like, when the internet was first being set up, why did it go to an ad-based model? And he was just explaining that at that time, no bank, because they were trying to figure out how to get banking into the internet early on so that people could actually pay for what they wanted. And banks could not figure out how to bake that into the internet from a pure technology standpoint. And so they were like, well, whatever, let's just run banner ads because we can figure out how to do that. And then we fast forward, whatever it is, 30 years. And the fact that the internet is an ad-based economy has more devastating effects than we could ever realize. One of them being this like microcosm of, you're a woman working in the Celtics organization, and Woj and Shams are battling for this artificial economy of clicks and attention. So they put out a story before they have all of the information, and you see how it plays out from there. And I mean, you didn't quite get to the heart of like the artificial economy of Twitter when it comes to NBA news.
Well,
And-
let's
and-
go
and
one.
Well, real quick, that's the wild part about it, because there is no value to the news organizations, and dare I say, they're the only value that exists is to Twitter itself. Twitter gets to reinforce its status as, you want to know where things happen first, you get it here. You don't get on Instagram with their pretty pictures. You don't get it on TikTok with their little dances. You get it here. This is where the news happens. And so the news breakers are incentivized to be first on the scene enough time so that they build their own reputation, because even now there are plenty of stories that break with smaller reporters first, but when one of these national guys breaks it after them, they get a lot of the credit because that's where people are following. But again, all of this is all based in psychic benefit, psychic compensation. There's no real money for these people, right? The real money is going to Twitter, because the reality is The Athletic, for instance, does not benefit from Shams breaking the story. You might say they benefit from people wanting to know more, and then they click on the link of the story that comes out later that goes to The Athletic that you have to subscribe to, $4 a month or whatever. Okay. But a lot of times these newsbreakers, like have you ever read an Adrian Wojnarowski tweet and then read the follow-up, like write-up that he does? Rarely do you discover new things in the write-up. It's like when your teacher says, "Oh, give us 700 words on this," and you're struggling with cannot instead of can't, and do not just to get to the word limit, because there is no extra to it. It's just fluff. I got everything I needed from the tweet. And so if that's the case, and the conversions from tweet to the actual link are actually limited, like a direct mailer that you find in your mailbox telling you to go to Pizza Hut for 2-for-1s or whatever, then why do we value this so much unless you are Twitter?
Well, there is value. There is absolutely value in it. And part of that value is the speed of being the person that, for that individual person, there is value. It increases your followers. And and people do, whatever algorithms they use, there is inherent value in trying to create yourself as the person, as the go-to, when all the players are out there, retweeting you and talking about you and talking about you. And also, let's not forget, too, the number of ex-players who are all sitting there trying to maintain their positions as insiders. Everyone needs to be an insider, that their value is based on this. But it comes at it, as Kate was saying, it does come at a specific cost, which is this journalistic question that we've all had.